I've been thinking a lot lately about how photographs influence our memories, not just of people and places, but also events in our lives. For example, I've realized that there are memories of certain aspects of my childhood that are rooted not in an actual event itself, but rather in the photograph depicting the event. In fact, there are multiple important events in my life where the time surrounding the event itself is a complete blur, and my memory, quote unquote, of it only exists because there happens to be a photograph. So in this conversation, we're talking about how memory can often be influenced or even replaced entirely by photographs. We're also wrestling a bit with a question that Sean Tucker asked about whether photography is more about the end product, the image, or is it more about the process of making it? I'm Jeffrey Sidoris, I'm talking to John Wilkening, and this is In Between. So, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah, it's always fun around Philadelphia for New Year because we have the Mummers Parade.
Right. How was it this year?
It was awesome because it wasn't 4 degrees like last year.
That's a definite plus. That's a definite bonus. Yeah.
Last year was so cold that when you got home and you were in the house for an hour, you still felt cold.
Yeah, no.
It seeped in that.
No. The only place I want to be when it's 4 degrees outside is home somewhere watching you in 4 degrees outside. That just doesn't compute for me.
Yeah, so this year was, balmy, like 55.
That's actually pretty good. I mean, can you believe that? January? 55 degrees in January?
Yeah, it's part of me every time you have one of these days where you're like, maybe global warming isn't so bad.
Right.
So it was good that way, It was fun getting out and shooting for the first time in a while.
Right.
I had that fun moment where I looked at my camera and I'm like, oh, there's 6 frames in here. I wonder what film I'm using.
I'm looking in the wrong end. Why does everything look so far away?
Yeah, and thankfully I don't have a lens cap for. I was shooting with a Rolly 35.
Nice.
Which are unique because they're scale focused. Meaning you set the distance on it's almost like a focus ring on the lens,
right?
And you set the distance, but when you look through the viewfinder, it's just a viewfinder.
So it's not reflecting what the camera's seeing.
No. So if you did have a lens cap, you could theoretically shoot to your heart's desire. You never realize it until you looked at your front of your camera.
And just between us, John, because nobody's listening, how many times have you done that?
Thankfully, like I said, since I don't have a lens cap for this, it hasn't happened on this camera, but I've definitely done it on other rangefinders.
Yeah. I was in, there was a big protest march in Hollywood, and I had my F2 and I had a bunch of rolls of HP5 and loaded a roll, and I'm shooting and just kind of losing myself. I'm in the crowd, I'm shooting, I'm having a great time, and I thought, man, I am getting a lot of frames on this roll. And yeah, so it had come undone from the sprocket and I got nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. I've definitely done that before. Where you're like, son of a sorry for my language for those listening to the car,
right.
But
that's all right.
Yeah, those are one of those things where I feel 100% justified in using whatever language that comes out.
Right.
So it was a good day collectively, but it was one of those where I was on my feet from like 8:30 to about 4 in the afternoon, and I don't know how many miles I covered.
Wow. How many rolls did you end up shooting total?
I think 6 or 7 rolls of 35. I haven't developed any of them. I literally got home and within a half an hour it was in bed.
Right.
So
and just got up about 20 minutes ago.
I wish. My alarm goes off at 4 in the morning, so it's a quick turnaround.
I've been thinking a lot, even though it's only the second, I feel like for the last week or so, I've been thinking a lot about photography and photographs and memory. And I wrote some stuff about it today. And it's weird, man. There are certain things that I can remember so clearly, and other things that I should be able to remember but have completely vanished. I can remember the photographs of the events, you know what I mean? But I can't
Okay, yeah.
remember the real life events. Like, one of the things that I was writing about today was just reflecting on the past year and how it seems like the older you get, the faster the years go at the end. But when you're in it, time is moving, time marches on, kind of thing. But then when you get to the end, you're like, wow, man, that really went by fast. And I was thinking about, my mom has been gone for 9.5 years, my dad 5. And as weird as it is to say, I don't remember their faces. I don't remember the details of their faces other than the way they looked when they died. My dad, because I took a photograph of him, my mom, it was just a very intense time. I remember my mom had this glamour shot taken, and I remember that shot very clearly, like a portrait, one of those like soft focus with the makeup and all that kind of stuff. I remember that very clearly. I remember a couple photographs of my dad very clearly. But for example, his birthday, which was February, and then he died in November. But that February, I remember the evening. I remember what we had for dinner. I remember what the dishes looked like. I remember his best friend, Dennis, sitting across from me in the living room having a conversation, and my dad sitting just to my left on the same sofa as me. I can't picture his face at all. Zero memory.
Yeah, I kind of understand I understand that idea, because my mom had 5 years ago had her voice box taken out because of cancer. So she communicates through a combination of lip reading, and she has one of those vibrating sticks. I don't know what they're actually called. And I honestly have a hard time remembering her voice.
What she sounded like beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so strange. So it's gotten me thinking about memory, and even though like I've been here on the East Coast now for, gosh, I guess 3 years, a little over 3 years. I can't remember hardly any of those first couple years. I can remember certain little things. And I was just talking to Adrian about this on the phone. I can remember, sort of seeing her and Sylvia for the first time, that meeting. I remember, certain moments. I remember the drive across country when I finally did come here. But other things that were, in some cases pivotal moments or poignant moments in my life, no memory of whatsoever.
How do you think that ties into photography?
Because I remember the photographs of the events. I remember a photograph that I probably haven't seen in 10 years or 15 years, maybe, of some events. I think, gosh, I must have been probably 12 or 13 years old. I remember that photograph like I just looked at it this morning, but I don't remember the events that it's depicting. And I find that on some level throughout my life, where a memory that I have of a specific event is not a memory of the event at all. It's a memory of the photograph that was taken of the event, which I find, again, really fascinating.
Yeah, I could see. It's one of those where I had this conversation where a friend of mine mentioned that they had the chance through work to go to Switzerland. They have a manufacturing facility in Switzerland. And I was like, I think I've been to Switzerland because there's a picture that looks like Switzerland, but like I can't.
Was it a little chocolate castle?
Oh, it was those classic sort of Alps pictures where the valley is like mile below and the mountains just goes almost straight vertical.
Right.
And there's a picture of me when I'm about 1.5, being held by my dad on top of one of these things overlooking the valley beneath it. And it's like, theoretically, I guess I counted going to Switzerland, but
Mm-hmm.
it, it is not exactly the same.
Right.
You know, like, do you think because when you see a photograph, it's somehow your brain knows that a photograph is you saying this event is important because we're going to mark it via an image.
Mm-hmm.
And so your brain goes, okay, we have that image. We have what's important. We could overwrite the other memories.
Right. I don't know. I mean, that's a really, I think that gets to a bigger discussion of when I was a kid, the camera was this sort of mystical device, and you took the camera out, you photographed whatever it was that you were photographing, and then you put the camera away. So yeah, in some ways there was an importance to making a photograph of something, whether it was a place or an event or a person. But I wonder now, and this is, it's an unfair comparison because now I'm 51 instead of being 12 or something. But in 20 years' time, will I remember how many of the photographs that I'm looking at on a screen, not holding in my hand as a print, will I remember by comparison? Do you know what I mean? Like, does your brain, because photographs have become so commonplace, and the act of taking a photograph or making a photograph, if you're one of those people, is so commonplace, has it lost its importance and your brain doesn't keep track anymore? Your brain doesn't file that away under, oh, this is important, we went through some stuff to get here. It instead, nope, you just pulled out your phone, swiped to the left, and went snap, or snap, 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 if you're one of those people. And you know who you are.
Yeah.
So does our, do our brains now not think of photographs as important, or as important as they once were? And how will I measure that? Because as I get older, arguably my memory will become worse. So there's not a fair comparison. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Where I'm trying to get to?
Yeah. As the sort of availability of photography as a medium has increased, has the value of it as a holder of value, let's put it that way,
Mm-hmm.
increased as well, or has it decreased?
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. And I don't know. I remember again, I'm 51, so I remember almost the novelty of seeing someone with a nice camera.
Mm-hmm.
You went, oh wow, you've got a 35 millimeter. That's and again, it may not have even been a nice camera, but the fact that it was a 35 millimeter SLR with interchangeable lenses, which was different than my little Instamatic with the magic cubes on the top, meant that it carried some more weight. So maybe you were more important, or the things that you photographed with it were more important because the device itself was somehow better, or perceived as better.
Do you think that happens now with, if you want to say, oh, you have a Canon, what is it, 5D4,
Mm-hmm.
or fill in the blank, the new Sony, you have the new fill in the blank latest camera.
I think it depends on the camera. I mean, I think, if you saw somebody walking around with a street photographer, let's say, walking around with a Phase 1 IQ3, would you think, wow, they must really be good? Or would you think, douche? I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah. There's definitely something where, like, a certain level of camera, you mentally go, oh, that's a professional.
Yes. Well, yeah, but then
Yeah.
you see, you see this Russian kid that I follow that shoots almost exclusively with an iPhone, and his work is amazing. I mean, it's just amazing because it's not about 52 megapixels and edge to edge sharpness. It's about composition and narrative and what's in the frame.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. It's a really interesting question, and it's something that I've found myself thinking more and more about, especially with my own sort of saga around cameras over the last, you know, few months, few years kind of thing, you know? I'm thinking about the tool much more than I used to.
Do you think people today buy cameras because they can't actually create an image they want to, or do you think people buy cameras as a means of self-validating their own choice? Maybe that's not the right way to put it.
Well, I think both are true. I think that you know, the camera you choose, there are all kinds of different reasons why you might choose it. You might have listened to several prominent YouTubers say that this is the camera to get for 2018. You may have read specs. You may know people who shoot with this type of camera, and you go, well, gosh, you know, so and so uses this, and they're doing the kind of work that I want to do. I should get something like that, if not the exact same thing, because then maybe I'll be able to do the things that they're doing as well. Which, of course, we know is ridiculous because, you know, you could hand a photographer, a great photographer, any number of cameras, and they're going to get amazing results. I mean, look at somebody like Avedon, who was able to shoot with 35 and 2.25 and 8x10 and have the same kind of aesthetic and the same kind of energy and the same kind of feel to the photographs, regardless of what format or type of camera he was using. And in those examples, they're completely different methods of shooting. But that
Mm-hmm.
energy and that aesthetic is constant throughout. And I think there are any number of photographers for whom that's true.
Yeah.
What we sometimes get caught up in is the hype around the gear and the hype around the hardware, and go, well, if I only had that one, you know, then I'd be able to do this. If I only had a medium format camera, then I'd be able to, you know, make 6x8 foot pictures. Well, when are you ever going to do that? You know, it's sort of like when I was when I was testing out the Olympus EM1 and then the XT2, because the 3 hadn't come out yet. And, you know, I'm doing all these tests at 3200 ISO and 6400 ISO and going, well, you know, this one looks decidedly different and better and worse. And you know, Sean was like, well, how often do you shoot at 6400? And I'm like, well, I never do. Well, then why are you testing what they can do at that ISO if you never shoot there? Like, so what? Like, it doesn't matter which one's better at that level because you're never using it like that. You know, like this hammer is a horrible screwdriver. Well, okay, you know, and I think that's part of what has become the modern sort of photographic struggle when it comes to buying gear. Because let's face it, you know, you and I have talked about this a number of times. There aren't really any bad cameras.
Mm-mm.
Not
No.
anymore. I mean, almost any camera that you buy circa, you know, 2015 on is going to be a really terrific camera relative to what you had, at least in digital, 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah. One thing that sort of popped in my head during this talk is, what do you think causes people to look at their current gear and go, I need a different camera?
I can't answer that. I have no idea. I know people that get new cameras with every revision. Every new, like if they're Canon users, they're getting the Mark 1, the Mark 2, the Mark 3, the Mark 4, like clockwork. I don't know why. I don't, I mean, for me, it was because it was a real world scenario. I was missing shots. You know, that X Pro 1, as much as I love it and still shoot with it, that camera combined with the 35 f1.4, which is that big piece of glass with a very heavy piece of glass and a slow focus motor, that combination wasn't great for moving subjects. It's great for architecture. It's great for still subjects. It's great for portraiture. It's great for maybe even events where things aren't moving quickly. But if you're shooting street, trying to get people in the midst of, you know, one motion to another, or you're shooting something where the subject is in motion and maybe you are in motion, it's just not fast enough. And I found myself missing more and more shots. If it focused faster and still felt the same way, I would have no reason to look at another camera, because and I've said this before, I think that's probably my favorite digital camera of all time.
Yeah, yeah, like I could see, you know, we've talked enough. I've talked enough with you about your sort of desire for a camera, and like where you're actually missing shots is 100% valid, if you want to say, reason to getting, you know, getting a new camera. I just wonder how often that's a case, that's the reason why. You know?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's more a case of, well, this is incrementally better and it's the newer version, and maybe I've put, you know, 100,000 shutter clicks on my current rig, so it makes sense to upgrade. I don't know. I don't know.
Because like when I had a Canon 5D Mark III for a while, and to be honest, I bought that one purely because that's what professionals use.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be professional.
Sure.
And I realized not too long after using it that wasn't the camera for me.
Mm-hmm.
That I bought it for an idea rather than for reality.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, this kind of gets us into one of the other things that we were going to talk about. And that is the idea of photography as, is it about the end product, or is it about the process of making the image, or is it a combination of you know, the two for you? You meaning the proverbial you, not you specific to you, although you too. And I think that gets at why you want a particular setup, why you use a particular piece of gear. I can tell you that, you know, not to get too deep into it, but while I do have the XT3 and it produces really terrific images under, you know, certain conditions, it's not nearly as comfortable in the hand as the Olympus EM1 Mark II. It's not as fun to shoot. And I'm sure that a lot of people out there will disagree with me, because everybody seems to be fawning over it and calling it, you know, camera of the year. And maybe it deserves to be camera of the year. But the ergonomics are still crap for my hands, for me, you know, for what I am looking for in a camera body. So on that question of process versus outcome, yes, I want the outcome to be great, which is sort of obvious by the ridiculous way I was shooting test images. But, you know, I did a shoot last week, and it just wasn't fun to shoot with. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It just wasn't fun. It didn't feel good. I found myself having to sort of change my grip a lot to try and get to the buttons and dials that needed changing. You know, the images look good, but part of me is going, well, so what? I mean, if you don't want to pick it up, or if you feel like you're fighting with it, then what difference does it make? And I think a lot of digital cameras right now have that same kind of ergonomic challenge, where they just feel like little bricks, you know. Some don't, like DSLRs still maintain that nice hefty grip by and large, But the mirrorless cameras and the smaller cameras like the X100, or on smaller cameras and smaller mirrorless cameras specifically, there's not much to hold on to in the way of feeling ergonomic. And that bugs me, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was funny when you sent me that the question.
Mm-hmm.
My initial gut reaction is all that matters is the final image. I'm one of those that I shoot on film, but I totally understand why that's a ridiculous, like, film is ridiculous to other people. Like, I understand that, and like,
Yeah.
and I don't advocate you anyone else shoot the way I shoot, because that's the way I shoot.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those. But at the same time, when I look at my own sort of life and sort of decisions, equipment, like, or tool wise, I'm choosing film because of the process to making the image.
Right.
And that the final product is a byproduct of the process. So like it's one of those things where, like, I think it's I almost want to say it's both, but like that it also feels like a cop out to me.
Mm-hmm.
you know.
I don't think it's a cop out at all. I think for a lot of people, it's going to be both, weighted in one direction or another, but I think because it has to be, on some level, it has to be about the final image, because that's what represents the process, right? That's the
Mhm.
the image is the evidence of the process.
Yeah.
And that's not me. I think Dan Winters said that in a conversation that we had. I think that was his thing about, it's the photograph is the evidence of the process that went into making it. So you can't have one without the other. You can enjoy one more than another. You can enjoy engaging in one more than another.
hmm
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. How much? How much do you think people are aware of the process they go in to produce the images? Because I hear photographers talk, and sometimes I feel that people are going, maybe not going through the motions, but like their focus is so heavily on the final product that they don't sit there and analyze their process at all.
It's a good question. Um, and I don't, unfortunately, I don't know that I have a good answer. I think there's a reluctance. Well, I don't think. I know that there's a reluctance with a lot of photographers to show, and irrationally so, I think, to show where the image started versus where it ended up. I mean, we both know photographers that wouldn't show you their raw files for love or money,
Yeah.
because they only want to be known for that final image. But there's a big part of me that wants to go, well, yeah, but wait a minute. If you can take this, if you can take a raw file that was a challenge to get in the first place, and maybe the light was mediocre, maybe, you had to do some compositing, you had to do some retouching, whatever it may be, but you were able to turn some of the technical issues around. I mean, let's say the composition was there from the beginning, but you were struggling with some of the technical, and you were able to turn that around in post. I don't think that diminishes the quality of the end product at all. If anything, I think it speaks to the ability of the photographer to see beyond where some of the technical hiccups happened and still make something compelling from it.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite books of all time is the Magnum contact sheets. We all have we almost can, talk about visual memory. Like there's some of these famous like Kappa picture of the guy getting shot in, I believe it was Spain, or any of these famous shots, and then you look at what came before it and what came after it, and it looks like anyone in this world's pictures before and after.
Sure.
Like it was one of the more freeing revelations, was that the greats of the greats of photography are shooting the exact same pictures everyone else is shooting 95% of the time. It just so happened that when they nail it, they hit it out of the park.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think that's one of the most valuable books out there for seeing the way some of our photographic heroes were able and willing to work a subject or to work a scene where maybe some of us, myself included, would have given up after frame 5 or 6 or 7. It was frame 8 that, as you just said, knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. And like knowing that all came about by someone pulling the curtain behind the process and sort of sharing that.
Well, and I think we need to be clear about working a subject or simply seeing and waiting for that horribly overused term in photography, but decisive moment. That's process as well. It's not, process doesn't just occur after the image has been taken in post-processing. That's part of it. But I think that process is certainly scouting locations, waiting for a moment, watching the action, anticipating moments and gesture and movement and snapping. I think that's process as well.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of meeting up with other photographers and going shooting. Because we'll stand at the same location, have the same scene in front of us, and go about shooting it in completely different ways. Majority of people are facing one way, and then this other person is literally turns away from the thing you would think would be the picture of.
Right.
And he finds this interesting picture in the opposite direction, or everyone's shooting high and someone shoots low. Like, just the way people approach a scene and work it is so radically different.
Yeah.
And then being able to almost walk and steal someone's technique, or go, that's what they saw when they did this.
Right.
Like, maybe I need to focus more on that, or, do it a slightly different way.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the most fun things about meeting up with Martin Rotz in Cologne, was seeing how differently he shoots. And because he's shooting at such a longer focal length than I am, he sees things that are both, metaphorically and literally out of my reach. I just can't see the compositions that he's seeing. He's shooting with a long lens. I'm shooting with a 35. And there were times where we were walking and I would just ask him, what do you see? What is it that you're looking at? And he would show me the back of the camera, or he would just hand me the camera and go, look right up here, and allow me to sort of move my lens around, move my frame around to see or try to see what he saw. And in some cases I could still see it, but in other cases, even with the same hardware, to your point, I still didn't see what he saw. I still didn't see it the way he saw it. And it was absolutely like one of the most fun experiences shooting I've had in a while.
Yeah. Is there an exercise or something that you could try to replicate that experience, other than going to Amsterdam and bugging rods?
Which I'm sure he wouldn't mind, right?
No.
I mean, Martin, maybe short of, buying another lens and just going out and mixing it up that way. And it's funny, when I was shooting film, I would do that. You know, sometimes I would go out with a 50, but then other times I would go out with my 80 to 200 taped down at 200 to just change it up and force myself to see differently. So I mean, maybe there's room to do that again. You know, and one of the kind of fun things about digital cameras with crop factors is you get to go so much closer than what we did, you know, in film. You know, an 80 to 200 was just that, 80 to 200. But if you throw that same focal length on a micro four thirds camera, for example, now you're out at 400 millimeters, and it changes the way you see again. You know, so I mean, maybe there are exercises like that to be done. I'm not sure. I mean, I admittedly, I stay in that 35 millimeter to 50 millimeter range. And honestly, maybe that's why I've been, or one of the reasons anyway, that I've been a little unhappy with my photography lately is in this environment where I'm at. Maybe that's the wrong focal length for these streets. Maybe that's the wrong focal length for this architecture, for these details. Maybe I need to get tighter. Maybe I need to get further away and shoot wider, you know? But I feel like I need to mix up both what I'm seeing and how I'm seeing it to sort of get myself out of this space.
Mm-hmm. Have you tried to, almost like as an exercise, go out and shoot in the style or manner of specific photographers?
No, but actually I've got that. It's funny that you mentioned that. I've got that in my sort of list of projects for 2019, is to put my spin on some of my favorite photographers' work, and not necessarily trying to emulate or replicate a specific shot, but trying to capture their particular aesthetic. You know, I'm not going to go
Mm-hmm.
shoot somebody against a white background and put like bees all over them. That's not that literal. But, you know, I have this scene that I've been
You're gonna
thinking
try
about.
wasp.
That's right. What? It's a different insect. What?
Yeah.
There's the trailhead that's at the end of our street that goes into the forest, especially when it gets really misty, is such a creepy scene. And there's a guy that lives on our street that's got this old Ford, like early 70s F100 pickup truck that I've wanted to ask if I can either borrow, or would you just go park this at the end of the street at dusk and let me stage this setup or this scene that I want to do, that in my head anyway feels very sort of Crewdson-esque. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably going to be a complete failure by comparison, and I'm okay with that. I just want the experience of trying to make this sort of world, you know, that sort of Twin Peaksy kind of just off center world that he has managed to create so incredibly well over the years.
Yeah. Uh, it's something where like almost do running assignments where almost like a costume where you put on the style of,
Mm-hmm.
fill in the blank.
Yeah, I
You
love
know,
that as a series of assignments. You know, go shoot in the style of Penn. Go shoot in the style of whoever, Neil Leifer. Go shoot sports in the style of Neil Leifer and see what you get.
mm-hmm.
Go shoot, you know, in the style of Gary Winogrand or Bruce Gilden or something. Although be careful if you shoot like Bruce Gilden. People might not put up with that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, because I think it's so easy to get stuck in a stylistic sort of rut
Mm-hmm.
where you're just producing the same image over and over again.
Right.
Where if you have to adjust and sort of get out of your comfort zone, that you could then learn a little piece of something that you then take and adjust your style maybe 2 degrees or 2%.
Right.
And then but if in that constant sort of compounding adjustment period, you end up somewhere interesting in a year or
Mm-hmm.
otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might be interesting. And look, to be honest, since I've wanted to either build or establish or somehow put a stake in the ground around a new community that wants to take on some of this stuff as a group, that wants to not share everything you take because you can do that on Instagram, but instead create this sort of uh, platform's the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying, where where purposeful photography can be shared and discussed in detail, not just, ooh, like that. Ooh, great snap, great shot, great capture.
Yeah. Who's it? Austin Kleon has the concept of a genius, I think is how I pronounce it, and how there's the myth of a lone genius who's in his basement and all comes up with like an amazing work of art,
Right.
where he talks about how a lot of those guys are fueled by a scene
Mm-hmm.
rather than an individual person, like an individual, like by themselves,
Sure.
and that it's by those people continually talking to similar artists or other artists that they then develop something in that community. They develop something that is profound,
Mm-hmm. And
you know.
much more profound than what they could have accomplished solo.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because they could bounce ideas off of each other. They could do all this sort of stuff that by themselves they don't aren't afforded that chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I definitely think that there's value in it, and I think the current model actively um, sort of almost resents working as a group. It actively discourages the group mentality in favor of the solo image, the solo brand, the solo product, the solo. And I think one of the results of that is we see a lot of work that looks very, very similar
Mm-hmm.
because there is, and I could be completely off base about this, and I'm fully willing to own that, but it seems like there is emulation without discussion, so that
Yeah.
the work ends up just being similar because all you're looking at is the visual, not the process or the reason or the narrative or insert word here that's important to you to create it, that went into creating it. You're just seeing the end result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think final images can be copied, but the journey to create them can't.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
And like I've always had the mentality that I will freely share my process and information as much as I can, because even if you could copy what I do better than I can do it,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the information that created it. So you don't have the foundation that you could then innovate off that.
Yeah, your branching pattern is going to be completely different. You can start in a similar spot, but yeah, you're right. You won't they don't have your life experience, they don't have your in some cases struggle to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean you could maybe come up with a couple one-off images where you go, "Oh, that looks like so and so," but where do you go from there? And I think the where
Yeah.
do you go from there, that's the most exciting thing. Making an image that looks like someone else's image, I don't know really where. I mean, yes, I suppose there's a challenge in it, but I think the greater challenge is, okay, where does that iterate to? What comes out of that? What does that inform next?
Yeah. as your artistic career gets defined by those single images, I don't think a single image can survive by itself. It needs to be in a chain of images that keeps keeps on pushing that image in front of people.
Mm-hmm. I almost wish that there was a way to, a feature maybe in Instagram where you can see that one image, but then with a quick tap, you can sort of almost push that image back visually and see what's on left and right. See what came well, yeah, see what came before it and what came after it. In the case, of it being the last image, you only see, what came before it, obviously. But if you happen to link in on somebody's, on an image in somebody's feed and it's mid feed, it would be kind of neat where you could just with a tap throw that one to the background and almost scrub through an image or two or three on either side without having to
Yeah.
go, oh, let me look at your, go back to your profile and then search for that particular image. Almost like a video timeline, basically.
Yeah, and you're looking for the through line. You're looking for the thread.
Right. Not just that single endpoint.
Do you think people are afraid of sharing the thread? Because oftentimes when a great image is created on a pile of garbage images, even if you didn't think they were garbage at the time of creating, but because your skill has progressed far enough that you now then view them as bad.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I don't know that most people think about through line and what one image says about another or how one image is even related to another. I mean, I think there are a couple people that I follow that will, in fact, it's increasing really too, more and more, where they'll post in one post on Instagram, they'll post 3 or 5 or even 7 or so images, almost like a little mini story in and of itself, where you can see a narrative or a progression of images rather than just a single. And I find that I really enjoy that a lot more than just going, oh wow, one image. I love
Mm.
seeing 4 or 5 or 6 images in a sequence to see what you were trying to achieve or what you were. And look, knowing that those are curated as well, right? I'm not seeing images 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm seeing, 22, 60, 147, 300, whatever.
Yeah,
But at
yeah,
least there has been some thought put into how these things are presented, and there's been some curation to create a multiple image of a multi-image single experience.
yeah. I wonder. Do you think the social media and sharing has changed our how we view images? That we get so used to seeing them as single images that we don't practice producing work in groups or bodies of work.
Probably. I mean, I don't have any data around it, but I think that's probably true. I mean, you talk to Matheson, Chris Matheson, for those of you who may not know his work, ChristopherMatheson.com, I think isn't that his site? Or is it chrismatheson.com with a K?
I believe it's Chris Matheson, but
Anyway,
yeah.
Matheson regularly prints out images and puts them down and looks at them together and moves them around and sees how they work within the body of work, within the sort of totality of what he's shot. And I know a few other photographers that kind of regularly do that. And I love that idea. I love the idea, and I don't print nearly as much as I should, but I love the idea of printing out a sequence of work and either putting it on the wall, even if it's just temporary, or at the very least, spending an hour or so with it spread out on the floor just to look at how it works together, and what you're seeing now versus what you saw a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. I know that's how Martin produces March and Rock, where he will spread out images on the floor and move them around, and in some cases rotate them 180 degrees, because some of his stuff is so abstract that it works, on both levels, both right side up and upside down. And he says it's absolutely integral to the success of the magazine and his own success as a photographer, to think about these things as sequences, not just single shots.
Yeah, my friend Nate Matos, he does it. He shoots film, or shoots a lot of film. I think he also shoots digital now, but like he'll print off like 4x6s of just like almost like a contact sheet of maybe he'll whittle it down, cut out half the images, or like make a like first cut, print them off in 4x6s, and then just put them like in a shoebox, and then come back a month later, lay them on the floor, rearrange them, play with them, look at them, then put them back. He like just keeps on going over the set of images.
Well, I think it tightens you up, right? I mean, it sharpens you, I think, to keep going back and looking and seeing what you found interesting then versus now. Seeing, were there colors that you were drawn to? Were there particular lines that you were drawn to? Were there shapes that you were drawn to? Were there lighting conditions that you were drawn to? And how have those things changed or progressed?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like he's been able to almost see through lines that weren't obvious there prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
To where he's like, hey, I've been taking this picture a lot.
Right.
What's going on here? Like, why do I keep on being drawn to this one type of image?
Don't you think that's more common than not? I mean, the idea of being drawn to certain compositions, or even styles. I mean, do you know any photographers who have actively said, well, I think I'm going to shoot like this. I think my style is going to be like this. And then they go do it? Or is it more of a style emerges in hindsight based on, to your point, what you seem to be drawn to and how you seem to be drawn to representing it?
In my experience, style is something that you could look back and see. It's not something that's a deliberate decision going forward.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many variables in play to go, I'm gonna shoot this. The only way that you could make that sort of decision is if you're copying somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've worked out all the elements to it.
Sure. Or if you're using a specific piece of kit, like a specific type of lens or something, where the results are very predictable. That I can see.
But like even that, like, I imagine if you pulled data on like the most widely used cameras that are posting on Instagram, let's just say, the vast majority of those images are going to be posted from us, say 5 pieces of kit, including an iPhone. Like,
I guess I meant more of like a specialty lens. Like if you're shooting with an 8mm fisheye, it kind of doesn't matter what you shoot. It's gonna pretty much look the same. Or if you're shooting with one of those sort of prism type of lenses that sort of fragment the image, well, I think there's only so much you can do with it, because it's going to look by and large the same. I'm not saying that everybody shoots with a 50 it's all the same, or everybody shoots with a 28. I'm talking about more like specialty kit.
Okay. Now I gotcha. Yeah.
Long exposure with one of those light sticks. It's like, okay, well, that all kind of looks the same.
Yeah. I'm more meaning like if if I'm gonna go, if I'm sitting here and go, so I don't shoot portraits.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go, okay, I'm gonna shoot black and white portraits with a white background, cut from like say mid chest up, you know, like I'm creating a style that I've seen
Right.
somewhere before.
Right. Where
It's
would you
not,
have seen white backgrounds mid? I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. Oh, but like the only way I could basically figure out all the variables is if I've already seen it,
Right.
and it's not like an intrinsic style. It's not
Mm-hmm.
something that's everyone who sees it would go, oh, you're doing that style,
Right.
like
Right.
where you look at say like I don't know my pinhole work is something where like the, there's a lot of people or a lot of people I know who are like, oh, that's my style because I'm the one they've seen it do it.
Right.
I didn't copy someone else. That's something that I figured out and saw, like sort of put the pieces together, iterated and created different versions of it until you see the style that it is today.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you
You
would
know.
you would mix it up too. You would give yourself these thought experiments, and we talked about them. That like, okay, if you handed Ernst Haas this camera, this pinhole camera, how would this look? What would that look like? So you're
Hmm.
you're not you're not copying a style directly. You're not doing a direct lift. You're letting someone else's work inform how you work, see, produce with the hardware and with your particular set of skills and experiences, which I find that way more interesting, because you got
Yeah.
something both distilled and not distilled out of the end of that, you know?
Yeah. 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 But like, I think those idea, like taking something like that idea, like saying what would this look like if so and so shot this, bringing his style but in a very different equipment, that gives you a solid enough framework that you know where the first step to go,
Mm-hmm.
and then you could figure out the rest from there.
Sure.
The hardest part in the like, it's like anything where if you hand a camera to someone and say, hey, shoot something that's 100% your style, people are like gonna go, if they haven't done it, you haven't put the work in.
Right. Right.
Like there needs to be an easy step forward, then create some momentum where you're like, well, I'll just swing the leg forward again and take the next logical step.
Right.
And then and then when you look back, you're like, whoa, I'm completely different from where I started with, but I just you know took these what seemed to be very logical steps in the moment because I got started by take creating this almost intellectual framework to play with.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. No, I'm thinking about it now. You were just making sure there was still movement. And then when you look back, you went, "Oh, wow. Huh. I covered a lot of ground." Or
yeah,
I thought I was going to end up somewhere else, but here I am here, you know?
yeah, it's something where I very much was like, I want to create interesting work. I have this idea of like, oh, what if I did something here, and then I do something and go, oh, that didn't work. I'll try something else. Oh, that kind of worked. I like that element. Let's play with that specific element and do it some more and go, that kind of worked, but I like in maybe let's take something that I did over here that didn't work, but let's try it now in this new framework. Oh, that worked a little more. I heard someone describe it that you almost want to have a near miss every time you go out shooting,
Hmm.
because if you hit something perfectly, you don't know where to take your next shot. But if you hit it close enough that where you could see where the bullseye is, but just off enough that it hits something you weren't intending, that gives you enough information to take the next shot, but also more information than you previously had. And then you hope you do the same thing where you have another near miss. And it just becomes this progressive like stacking of ideas or concepts together.
So did you have any near misses yesterday? Was there anything that sort of propelled you to go in a different direction? Because you've been, I mean, I think it's fair to say you've been struggling a little bit with the photography side of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yesterday, I just went in with no expectations on what to come out with or trying to. And I basically just brought one camera and one film stock. Was just going to go, I'm going to just shoot it this way and just try to create classic street photography, for lack of a better way to put it.
Sure.
Like,
how was this experience compared to, I mean, because I think your last shooting experience was your trip out west. How was this experience compared to that?
It was different because I was as much as the Mummer Parade is just pure chaos.
Right.
It's my chaos.
Yeah, it's like kind of where you live.
I've shot those streets so much. Like, it's literally in the like couple miles that I've covered on foot, like all the time. We got lunch from a food cart, and then one of the people I was with was like, "Is there a sunny spot that we could sit down and eat here?" And I'm like, we just need to go block down there, make a left, and there's basically a railing that we could sit on that's in the sun.
Right.
Because I'd walk those streets so much. So like, it's very different than being out west for the first time and sort of just being completely out of your element.
Right.
So, and I think it was very much different. In the past, I've always had this pressure on myself to really produce at the Mummers Parade, because it is for my impressionistic style. The Mummers Parade is like the best thing in the world, because it's like super bright colors, tons of people. Like, literally, if I got a sunny day on the Mummers Parade, I could burn through as much film as I possibly could. Like,
as much film as you could carry. Yeah.
But there was always this pressure, like, hey, this is the big time. This is your one day of the year. If you don't get this right, you literally have to wait another year. So this time I was able to go in without those expectations and just go in and go, hey, let's just get some shots. Let's
giving yourself permission to play.
Yeah. Let's see what you could do.
I think that's terrific, because the trip to the West really kind of knocked some of the wind out of the sails for you. And I think that giving yourself, that's kind of a theme that I've been thinking about a lot, is just giving yourself permission to make the work, to play, to have fun, to engage in, bringing us full circle, to engage in the process of making images without worrying about what comes out on the other side, and enjoying that and letting that drive what gets produced. Because I think if you enjoy the process of your skill, yes, you have to have skill with a camera, you have to know how to use it, etc. But I think that the enjoyment of the process will lead to better end products than if you feel like you're fighting with it the whole way.
100%. It's sort of the thing that pops in my head was Elizabeth Gilbert. She wrote the popular book Eat, Pray, Love.
Sure.
And some writer, after she hit it big, was like basically asking her for career advice. And there was a long story, but it basically distilled in every job has like a part that just sucks.
Right.
and you have to find the job that you enjoy doing the thing that sucks.
Right.
Because we could all do the job when it's at the peak. Like when everything is going right, anybody could do that job. And I think that applies to process as well. Anyone could do a process if it's going well. But we have to find the process that we will happily do when everything is going wrong. And but back to sort of I got to a point where the process wasn't something that I was getting joy from. So it became harder and harder to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was trying to almost fall back on the pure creative elements that sort of where I fell in love with photography to begin with.
If you're enjoying the conversations so far and in between and you'd like to keep listening, you can subscribe in iTunes or in your favorite podcast app. Or you can get it as part of my Everything feed, which also includes process-driven iterations and anything else I happen to put up. Just search for Jeffrey Sidoris Everything wherever you listen to podcasts. You can connect with me on Instagram and Twitter at Jeffrey Sidoris. That's JeffreySaddoris. Or you can visit my website at jeffreysidoris.com. If you've got ideas for discussions or conversations, email me at talkback@jeffreysidoris.com. Connect with John on Instagram at John Wilkening. That's JONWILKENING. Or by visiting his website at johnwilkening.com. Thanks very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we'll talk to you on the next one. I had that same outfit. Awkward.
I asked one of my friends who's a girl, I was like, what would happen if you're like dating some dude and you're just browsing through their closet and you stumble on that outfit?
Yeah, that's hanging on the back of the door.
But you don't know what the mummers are. Like, you have no concept what the mummers are. What is your first reaction? She was like, I would have questions. I was like, no shit.
Yeah.
So you're into some things, huh?
This isn't one of those plushy things, is it?
Yeah.
No. I'm a mummer.
Yeah.
You're what?
Yeah. Yeah.
And scene.